she is also a member of the Legal Aid and Awareness Committee. Asante sana. So to my brief remarks, the theme of the PIL Forum at the LSK Annual Conference 2026 is the state of the rule of law in Kenya, protecting constitutional democracy, civic space, and public accountability. Good afternoon, Mr. President, Senior Counsel present, distinguished guests, colleagues, and members of the Law Society of Kenya. On behalf of the Public Interest Litigation and Advocacy Directorate and the PIL conveners, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural Public Interest Litigation Forum of the Law Society of Kenya Annual Conference. Today marks an important milestone for the Society. This is the first Public Interest Litigation Forum to be held as part of the annual conference, and we see it as the beginning of something much larger than the conversation we are going to have this afternoon. We have deliberately convened this forum with the vision of creating a permanent platform for engagement on the rule of law, constitutionalism, civic space, public accountability, and democratic governance in Kenya. The aspiration is that this forum will continue to grow from year to year, bringing together legal practitioners, civil society organizations, governance institutions, accountability actors, development partners, and citizens committed to the protection of constitutional democracy. For that reason, I wish to recognize every person present in this room as a founding participant of this initiative. You can give yourselves a hand. You are helping shape what we hope will become one of the most important rule of law conversations within the legal profession and beyond. As we launch this platform today, we do so conscious that the challenges facing constitutional governance require sustained engagement, collective thinking, and coordinated action. The success of this forum will not be measured by today's attendance alone, but by the partnerships, ideas, and initiatives that emerge from it in the years ahead. The forum has been convened at a particularly important moment in Kenya's constitutional journey. While we have made significant democratic and constitutional gains over the last decade and a half, important questions continue to arise regarding institutional independence, judicial authority, executive accountability, civic freedoms, public participation, electoral integrity, human rights protection, and access to justice. These are not abstract concerns. They are matters that affect the quality of governance, the protection of rights, and the future of constitutional democracy in our country. The Law Society of Kenya has historically played a leading role in advancing constitutionalism, protecting fundamental rights and freedoms, and promoting access to justice, as well as defending the rule of law through public interest litigation, policy advocacy, and strategic interventions. The Society has consistently stood at the forefront whenever constitutional principles have required defense or reinforcement. Today's forum, therefore, is a continuation of that legacy and that responsibility. It provides an opportunity for honest reflection on the current state of the rule of law and practical discussions on how institutions and stakeholders can collectively strengthen constitutional governance. Allow me to warmly recognize and welcome our distinguished guests who have honored us with their presence today. We are privileged to be joined by members of the Senior Counsel Bar, including Jedida Waruiu, Senior Counsel. A hand of applause. Mr. Charles Kanjama, Senior Counsel and President of the Law Society of Kenya. We are also honored by the presence of distinguished leaders from partner organizations, governance institutions, and civil society, including all our panelists who will be introduced by Mr. Evans Ogada very ably. But allow me to mention Mr. Vincent Chahale, I believe in absentia, the Executive Director, International Justice Mission, who would have wanted to be with us, but has not been able to make it. But we have able representation from IJM by someone who will be introduced, and a former schoolmate of mine. We welcome all representatives of accountability institutions, governance bodies, development partners, academia, civil society organizations, and members of the legal profession who found it fit to join us this afternoon for this important engagement. I also wish to recognize and appreciate the eminent panel that has agreed to guide our discussions this afternoon. We are honored to be joined by Waikwa Wanyoike of the Open Society Justice Initiative. Can we give a round of applause? We have the pleasure of hosting this afternoon Diana Gishengo of TISA. A round of applause. My schoolmate from IJM, Eileen Imbosa of International Justice Mission. Wanjiru Gikonyo of Visawe. Wanjiru Gikonyo, thank you so much. She has been particularly instrumental even in the fundraising for this event. She's been telling us, go to that person, they will give you money. This one will give you support. This one will tell you thank you. And we appreciate your contribution to the success of this event. Commissioner Jedaida Waruiru, Senior Counsel and Director of the Witness Protection Agency. Again, a round of applause. And Titus Gitonga of Transparency International Kenya, or otherwise known as TI, Makofi. Collectively, they bring decades of experience in strategic litigation, governance, accountability, constitutionalism, civic engagement, and justice sector reform. This forum would not have been possible without the support of our partners and sponsors. On behalf of the society, we sincerely thank Transparency International Kenya, the Institute for Social Accountability, otherwise known as TISA, Article 19 East Africa, Gumbo and Associates LLP, the Open Society Foundations, Ndakala Advisory, and all other partners who supported the development of this initiative, and in particular some of our members who are aspiring to join the Judicial Service Commission. And allow me to mention Caroline Oduor, Jacqueline Waihenya, Jacqueline Ingutia, Ekaterina Handa, and Janet Wekesa. Your support demonstrates a shared commitment to strengthening democratic governance, constitutional accountability, and public interest litigation. As we approach another electoral cycle and continue to navigate complex governance questions, the need for such a forum has never been greater. The defense of the Constitution is not a responsibility of one person or institution. It is a collective obligation shared by all who believe in justice, accountability, democratic governance, and the rule of law. I therefore encourage all participants to engage actively, contribute candidly, and use this forum to help shape the future and direction of the rule of law caucus and the broader rule of law agenda in Kenya. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural Public Interest Litigation Forum. Let us use this moment to lay a strong foundation for a vibrant, influential, and enduring platform that will continue to strengthen constitutional democracy, civic space, and public accountability in Kenya, now and for years to come. Thank you, and may we all have an engaging afternoon. Asante sana. Before we move on with our program, I've been informed by Mr. Evans Ogada that in terms of protocol, I'm the closest to the presidency of the Law Society of Kenya. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome for his remarks Mr. Charles Kanjama, Senior Counsel, President of the Law Society of Kenya. Makofi, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Wycliffe, for your. Let's give him a warm round of applause. I would like to appreciate very much the conveners and co-conveners of the committees that have been mentioned. That is the Public Interest Litigation Committee. We have Wycliffe for your council member, and we also have co-convener Wanjohi Wambugu. We have the Committee of Legal Aid and Awareness. And that one I don't remember the conveners, but Penina and the co-convener? Catherine. And then we have the third Committee of Rule of Law and Constitutionalism. The convener is Evans Ogada, and the co-convener? They are going to elect. They have not yet met to elect. I'll also like to appreciate the Committee on National Elections. This is a committee that will have a life cycle of 1 or 2 years, we assume, because we have our national elections next year. Our convener is Anne Makori, and the co-convener is again Wycliffe Oyo. Let's give them a round of applause. When Wycliffe and Wambugu came to me and told me that they would like us to organize a side event for PIL, of course, you already have a busy Wednesday. I told them, please go ahead, but get effective panelists and get sponsors so that the panelists come without affecting the income and expense and the budget. And they've done a very great job. So I want to thank all the panelists and our sponsors who have made this event possible. Let's also give them a very warm round of applause. I want to thank you, the participants. The room is already full. And this is encouraging because it is after lunch. It means we have people who are passionate about the matters that we are discussing here, of rule of law and constitutional democracy, civic space, and public accountability. This area of legal practice is one that is often thought of or mentioned after you've gone through the list of the other areas of practice. You mentioned litigation, you mentioned conveyancing, you mentioned in-house, public sector, private sector. Then say, yes, there's also civil society. That has tended to be the way we deal with this area. But as the Law Society of Kenya, we recognize the central role of issues of rule of law and democracy, because without what is done by those of you who are champions of democracy, human rights defenders in this room and others, even the prestige or reputation of the entire legal profession, our confidence that people will obey contracts when they violate laws or there is a dispute that the courts will resolve them, will not be a confidence that is founded on any strong basis. So the work that is done here is very important. Wycliffe said that I was going to make a comment about why we have these 3 committees. We realize that we have a public interest litigation code in the Law Society of Kenya. But the work that needs to be done is extremely vast. The Public Interest Litigation Committee has been one of the busiest committees of the Law Society. LSK has become like a law firm. In fact, our PIL directorate that is led by Wangari Kagai and the other team, I forgot to mention them. Wangari yuko hapa na watu wa PIL. Ebu simameni tuwaheshimu pia. Let us give them a round of applause. The work that they do is like they are running a law firm. LSK is becoming increasingly involved in public interest litigation. In the old days, we used to look for a few strategic matters. We apply to be interested parties. These days, there are many people who even join us as interested parties in constitutional petitions. There are so many matters that affect our members. Under the PIL code, it says that any lawyer who thinks LSK should be involved in certain litigation should send a request to the Law Society for consideration. The PIL committee has established several subcommittees so that they can review the requests that come for public interest litigation. In the old days, the moment LSK gave you instructions, that was it. They would not even many times tell you, so what is the position of the society? The lawyer would decide what they think should be the position of the society. We've said we want the LSK PIL committee to discuss and agree when giving instructions what is our position. and on certain issues to come back and address the council so that the Council of the Law Society can take a position on the matter. We need to improve quality control in the litigation we do. So they have a lot of work. And the tendency was that LSK became largely reactive in our approach to rule of law and democracy. An act of parliament would be passed, we would look at it, we would panic and see there are some provisions that are unconstitutional, there would be uproar, we go to court. We've even told our Law Reform Committee, which is another important committee in this space, that they need to be more proactive and engaged in sending contributions to the bills. So we tended to be very reactive. Litigation, which is very important. But we said we also need to adopt a proactive approach to rule of law, democracy, and constitutionalism. For example, it is now, in the next 2 weeks, it will be 16 years since we got the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Have we done a proper and comprehensive constitutional audit to determine what is working, what has not been effectively implemented in this Katiba, what measures we need to put in place? We don't want it to be led by people in the executive, because when they lead this process, some of them, the politicians in their midst, they start thinking of amending the constitution to their advantage. So LSK can be a very good anchor of this process, and that is what we intend to do. When we paid a courtesy call to the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Speaker of the Senate, the Attorney General, and we told them what we intend to do, they said this would be perfect because you are a neutral and objective arbiter and expert in what is working in the Constitution, what we need to improve in. When the constitutional commissions and independent offices, the Chapter 15 commissions, every year they generate annual reports. Where do those reports go? Under the Constitution Chapter 15, they go to Parliament and the President. The President files them away, although now he's given this job to the Deputy President, and Parliament, they distribute them to the departmental committees. Most of the committees are busy and they don't really do much processing of these reports. The media are excited about Auditor General reports. Where are all the other reports going? Where are all the recommendations of the constitutional commissions, which remain under-resourced, underfunded? They have not effectively spread throughout the country. And the executive, we've noticed, clawing back on several functions or roles that have been given to the constitutional commissions that are collectively required to promote constitutionalism. So those are some of the challenges we are finding. And as LSK, we've said we want to work with the CCIOs so that they can effectively do their job. They can be well funded. And it is lawyers in our midst like yourselves who will be at the front line of this task. We are talking about rule of law. East African Law Society, and Evans Ogada was the chair of that committee on rule of law. They published a rule of law report with a rule of law analysis for each country in East Africa. Has Kenya ever published its own? The way Uganda Law Society used to publish an annual rule of law report? Not yet. The Law Society of Kenya wants to start doing that one. And we'll be announcing on 27th of August the start of that process. That is where we have the Rule of Law Committee. So they have a lot of work to be done. When we notice breakdowns in rule of law constitutionalism, we look proactively, we engage. The area of legal aid and awareness. For a long time, as LSK, our main initiative on legal aid is the Legal Awareness Week, the last week of October. We make up a bit of noise. We tell members you can get a CPD point if you do some pro bono work. Several of them approach the court building and they start looking for customers there. The clients are not there, but the forms are there. We fill the forms, we send them to LSK, we get a CPD point without really going where the people are. They are in the prisons, and the work of organizations like Justice Defenders has been amazing. They are in the refugee camps and UNHCR, and the work of Refugee Consortium of Kenya has been amazing. They are in the villages. The other day, we had a courtesy call with the governor of Machakos County, and she was telling us, can LSK go and have some kind of like work camps for the lawyers to give aid to our people? And in the process of doing it, you'll even get a bit of job, because some of them will need more legal assistance. Can you do that there in the villages? But as LSK, we've tended not to go there. So before I conclude, I want to say that what we intend to do as LSK is to establish a merit-based system that can incentivize each and every one of us, apart from all the other busy work we are doing, to occasionally do some mentorship and get some merit points, to do a bit of service to profession in pro bono work, get some merit points, whether it is diamond, platinum, gold, silver. We are developing the paper to determine what amounts to each. Whether you engage in committees of LSK, you do rule of law. We truly believe that if each and every one of us is able to dedicate a bit of their time, 3%, 5% of your time, service to profession and society, will transform our legal profession, will transform our workplaces, will transform our nation, and we will be truly on the journey to that first world status, whether it is Singapore or whatever it is that we are going to. So I want to welcome all of you to this event and to officially declare the Rule of Law PIL Forum officially open. Asanteni sana.
That is not how you clap for the president of the Law Society of Kenya. Najua mmekula. Moja, mbili, tatu. Corporate lawyers, nimeona a number of commercial people are here. The environment is going to change. My friend Ombogo tried to do the corporate thing. He's now into civic society space. In civic society, tunaifanya different. Comrades, power! Sauti kidogo na watetea na amunisaidi. Tujaribu tena. Comrades, power! Comrades, power! Some of you are hooligans here in school. Mulikuwa mnasumbua VC. You used to do it with a little bit of energy. Situweke hiyo energy kidogo. Mahinya kidogo, si ndio? Kuna mwingine pale nyuma sitamtaja. Alikuwa hooligan sana, classmate yangu. Tunamjua.
Umetuconfuse na that club.
Oh.
Civil society, we don't do that club.
Mnafanyaga gani?
Factorials.
Okay, haya, ndio hiyo. Haya, factorials ndio hiyo, tusaidie.
Let's do 3 factorials. Sawa? So, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1. Sawa? That's a factorial. So if I say 10, 10, 9, 8, like that. Sawa? So 3. Just practice. 3 factorial. You ready? We ready? I must correct you.
Ni sawa.
Na ni mara ya pili.
Macarius na mimi tunapiganaga. Sikusema makofi ya Nyayo. Ama namna gani?
Historical.
Asante sana. Now, we are about to start. And the conversation today is about the state of the rule of law in Kenya, protecting constitutional democracy, civic space, and public accountability. The Constitution is tapestried in a triad: rule of law, constitutionalism, and which is the other one? Rule of law, constitutionalism, and what? Democracy. But honestly, can we say that we are on the right path as a country? My friend Ombogo spoke of some politicians somewhere talking of the intention to amend the Constitution and to do away with public participation. You've heard of that, eh? So the Constitution faces a threat from these politicians. And our question today will be, when constitutional institutions come under pressure, who safeguards our safeguards? What role should institutions, the judiciary, and the legal profession play in ensuring that power, not only executive power, remains subject to the Constitution and to the law? To help us with that, we have a panel, and my good friend Macarius will help us with this.
Thank you, Senior. So allow me to introduce 6 amazing trailblazers. Amazing, amazing people. The young people would say old G's. OG. I think I'm mixing. So, acha nianze na the old G himself. Himself who? Mr. Waikwa Wanyoike. Welcome. He, as mentioned, karibu sana. Join us at the podium. He is the Director of Strategic Litigation at OSF, Justice Initiative also. He's previously co-founded the Katiba Institute. Sit freely. And he's also a barrister. He's a lawyer, yes, in Kenya, but he's a barrister in Canada and England and Wales. So we expect a lot of best practices and tell us what other people are doing in other jurisdictions. The second person I'll invite is a comrade, Miss Diana Gashengo. Gashengo, sorry. Kuna mtu wata type? Yes, so she is the Executive Director at the Institute of Social Accountability, TISA. She's also the convener of the Okoa Uchumi campaign as a civil society, which is a civil society and citizen coalition looking at finance accountability. She's also skilled in movement building and coalition management. She served on the board of the African Forum and Network of Debt and Development, and she's also the chairperson. She's also a chair at the Initiative for Equality and Discrimination. Karibu, Miss Diana. The next person I'll introduce is Miss Eileen Imbosa. I can't say it like from the region. She is an advocate and a justice systems specialist working with the IJM. Pass our regards to Mr. Chavel, your boss. Sorry, my tongue is failing me. I apologize. She worked closely with the Kenya Police Reforms Working Group. She's also a pro bono counsel with the Makadara Law Courts. She's also trained in constitutional building in Africa from Central European University in Budapest. Karibu sana IJM. Next person I'll invite is Wanjiro Gikonyo. She's a governance advisor and founder of Visawe. They look into social accountability and governance. There's also experience in citizen participation, good governance reforms in Kenya and beyond. Karibu, Ms. Wanjiro. The fifth person I'll introduce is from TI Kenya, Mr. Titus Gitonga. Welcome. He's a coordinator for the public finance management, natural resource, and climate governance at TI Kenya. Karibu sana, and pass our regards to your executive director. Last but not least, Nitakunywa maji. It's a very long, amazing introduction. I have the honor to introduce the Commissioner Emeritus, Ms. Jadeida Wakonyo Warohio. Karibu sana. She is the advocate of the High Court. She's also a certified public secretary. In 2020, she was named the Jurist of the Year due to public service. She was previously a commissioner at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. We are marking almost 3 decades of distinguished public service in human rights. She has served in both state and non-state institutions and outside Kenya, in West Africa to be particular. Nikunywe maji niendelee. She has worked with the KNCHR, the UNHCR, LRF, and the RPP, Release Political Prisoners. She was also elected as the first female at the Secretary General of the Kenya Law Society, Student Society in 2019. She's also the chairperson, the first chairperson of the Intersex Person Implementation Coordination Committee. She's also, in 2025, launched the first African Witness Protection Association and is the chairperson as we speak. Let me stop there for now, Commissioner. And it is a pleasure. Before I hand back to Evans, I want to ask us a question. All of us. I know we have questions and expectation, but I want us to, if you can put any of your hands, your 5 fingers. I'm a very practical person. I want to ask you 5 questions, and if you can answer all 5, you're doing well, and there might be a gift. Sawa? So put any hand, your 5 fingers up. All of us. I'm those people who participate. So this conversation looks at protection. But what exactly are we talking about? And where does protection stand? I want the panel, you can put your hands. I want you to see your audience, where you're starting from, the context, and the participants. So they are the ones judging you. Sawa? So protection. Question 1. Who is at risk and how do we safeguard them? Can you genuinely answer that question? If you can, drop a finger. If you can't, leave it up. Put it up so that our panel knows. Question 1 is on protection. Do you know who is at risk and do you genuinely know how to safeguard them? Question 2 on reform. What law, policy, or institution needs to change? Can you answer that, learned friends? On reform, what law, policy, or institution needs to change? If you can't answer, just leave your finger up. If you can answer, you've dropped maybe 2, maybe 1, maybe none. That's fine. Question 3 is on transform. What deeper power relationship or systems need to change? Transformation. What deeper power relationships or systems need to change? Can you answer or not? Number 4, expand. Who is excluded and how do we bring them into the conversation of civic space? Expand. Who is excluded and how do we bring them into the conversation of civic space? If you can answer, good. If not, it's fine. Last, disrupt. What harmful practices or mechanisms must we stop immediately? Disrupt. What harmful practice or mechanism or system do we need to stop? So those are the 4 questions. Protect, reform, transform, expand, and disrupt. So I need to know. I just need to know. If you have your 5 fingers still standing and you could not answer any of those questions, please stand up. And we are not judging you. We are just trying to see who is in the room. Okay. Right to privacy? Okay. Is there anyone who's dropped all the 5 fingers? Nasi Defenders Coalition. All the 5 fingers are down. Thank you. All the 5 fingers are down. Thank you. I'm seeing our partner is there. Yes. So we have a lot of work to do. I'm hoping we can plug in. And that's a challenge to our panelists. Karibuni sana. Mr. Evans will start us off.
Mumesikia jina disrupt, nikaona commercial lawyers wanaogopa. You're in good space. Musijali. Comrades power! Comrades power! Comrades ria! Asante sana. You see, my civil society people will not let me down. May I acknowledge the presence of my ICJ president. ICJ president Karibu. Civil society en font terrible numero 1. Lempas Suyanka is also joining us. Yuko hapa. Comrades, power! We want to hear from the panelists. Sindio? Let me start with my elder brother, Waiko Wanyoike. Tusikie opening remarks, tukienda hivyo. Alafu tufike kwa senior counsel. Nilisikia kitu Jedaida. Mimi namjua kama Jedida. Senior counsel. Tusikie kwake kwa mwisho. We start with you, Waiko. Opening remarks.
What's opening remarks? How many minutes do I get?
You have about 7 minutes. I know Waiko will be shorter.
Okay, thanks. These are actually not just opening remarks. They are my remarks. And thank you. And thank you to PIL committee, Oyo and Wanjohi and colleagues, Jared, Kombe, Wangari and others who've put this together. I wanted to actually just make 4 main points in terms of my intervention, and then I'm happy to take questions. Given what the topic is, and I think you have the program, I wanted to start us off on where we started, maybe a bit of where we are, and where we should be looking to go, just in 4 points. So it starts with the concept of transformative constitution or transformative constitutionalism. And then the question is, when we were thinking about 2010 constitution, and when we were thinking that we want to come up with a transformative constitution, what did that engender, or what was that supposed to communicate to people? Does anybody here know what the Constitution says about the aspirations of all Kenyans, right? Do people know that the Constitution has actually a provision that talks about aspirations of all Kenyans? And then, so what was that? And that's in the preamble. Najua tusomagi preamble, we just go to Article 1. And the preamble of the Constitution says that all Kenyans aspire for a government, recognizing the aspirations of all Kenyans for a government based on essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law. Because the reason I bring this up is sometimes we think we don't have a single shared objective. And the Constitution doesn't spell out a single shared objective. It does. And that is it. So whenever you find your provision or a provision that speaks to you, you always have to remember that you still have a shared single objective. But I think it's important to problematize this question about transformative constitution or transformative constitutionalism. What is that concept? And now I'm getting to Uganda's space, the teaching space. But transformative constitutionalism, or transformative constitution, which is our constitution, that concept has been developed by scholars, but it's not a scholarly concept. It's a very basic concept. But the best, for those who are interested in studying this, the best person to study is Carl Clare, who talks about the purpose of a transformative constitution is to engineer egalitarian social transformation. So when you think about where the society wanted to go with this constitution, including what I read about the preamble, they really wanted to engineer social transformation. The word social transformation, or the phrase, is actually very, very powerful. When you think how we can reorganize the state, we can reorganize our affairs if we were able to achieve social transformation that the Constitution requires. But then what happens after 2010 and after all the aspirations in the preamble? We start getting into the first and enduring sets of problems. And what are those? The first for me, and what worries me the most, is the capture of institutions. Because, and maybe I should back up a bit. You know, Professor Yashgai, who is obviously, who has inspired us, and some of us mentored us, says one thing about the Constitution, that the 2010 Constitution, that people need to know, is that this is the Constitution that the people imposed on political elites. Political elites ordinarily write Constitution for the people. But the 2010 Constitution was a constitution written by the people, then imposed on the elites. We knew that the elites will try and reverse that. And how are they doing that? They are reversing that through capture of institutions. That's one. And this happens in different ways. Recruitment. Think about recruitment. I want to be very upfront, because lawyers have been part of this capture, or have been facilitating this capture. If you look at Uhuru Kenyatta's regime, the 8 years or 10 years, however long Uhuru was in power, when it came to recruitment of members of commissions and independent institutions, Uhuru had some favorite standing members who would always feature in these commissions. Why? Because these are the people the executive was using to make sure that they get the right individuals, or at least a mix that has the right individuals. That's state capture. We are seeing it with Ruto it's happening. And unfortunately, we see it even within LSK. People actually all kinds of facilitating that capture, sometimes through members that they choose to sit in panels. So that's the first level of capture of state institutions. Amendment of the laws. We've lost the independence in the national police. The national police, which was supposed to be a service, the state has captured that, partly because the National Police Service Act was amended, including how the IG should be elected. Institutional decay, parliament especially, is the worst. We know. We don't need an elaboration on this. Unfortunately, even with all the independence and the power Parliament has, people are willing to be paid 5,000 shillings or 10,000 shillings in toilets just to vote one way, without recognizing the level of power. Judiciary, we've seen, and it's good, and I have to applaud Law Society for the actions it's taking. We may be divided about it, but it's unfortunate that our judiciary is decaying. I've talked about LSK because LSK can't be spared. Also a really significant institution in the rule of law ecosystem. And then the last point on capture of institution I wanted to make is that in many ways, a lot of us who are going into these critical independent institutions now see those institutions as a way of lifestyle, as opposed to really going there based on the commitment of the mandate that those institutions are supposed to deliver, including the transformative constitution. We have to reverse that. The last 2 points I want to make, Mr. Chair, and these are really fundamental and very critical for me. The first one is how are we doing as public interest litigators or strategic litigators? I feel that we are not exploiting the power of the law sufficiently. We are not exploiting the power and the potency of interest litigation sufficiently. It was okay in 2011 when Kibaki decided he'll name his friends as AG, solicitor, sorry, it was AG, I think JSC, the Chief Justice, and one other person I forget, DPP actually. It was okay for us to go to court and challenge that. But one thing I think we're failing and we are falling behind as public interest is we are not this fight a notch high when the state has become very complex and very organized. Become much more informed of how we engage with public litigation as a starting point, and I'll make 2 points on this point. As a starting point, we have to appreciate that we wield so much power when you do public interest litigation, and that you're dealing with extremely complex issues. I always say it's amazing that members of parliament can come to Ani for a public participation or whatever they do here a law. They'll go around the country, and an advocate overnight write a petition and the and blocks an entire law. I appreciate that. It also means significant responsibility. Thinking, but I think we actually need to think about the PIL as a space where we bring significant infrastructure, not just for lawyers, but other experts. So that, for example, when Dangote says he wants to build a refinery in Lamu, is it good enough for us to go block that, as opposed to blocking it with sufficient information, evidence, and engagement in terms of what the community or we want to see? do we have that responsibility? Because deliberative democracy means that you use litigation to actually have a conversation with policymakers, and you force or you try and persuade your policies to be undertaken. It also means being proactive, and again, I thank PIL committee for thinking proactively, and I think the president said this. Instead of waiting for things just to happen and then go to court, why can't we be proactive to think about what we need to bring to try and create conversations through litigation? And I can give quite a number of examples, but I know I don't have much time. The final point, which again is important, especially for membership here, I have to let you into a secret. You know, when you think about how we got the 2010 Constitution, and in many ways how 2010 Constitution has been maintained, civil society has played a very significant role. Civil society really helped to organize and to keep the tempo consistent for us to get a new constitution. Left to politicians, politicians were willing just to do minimum changes. Civil society has tried to also keep protecting the constitution. Unfortunately, the civil society, the space for civil society is not as strong as it was in the 90s, early 2000s. There are a lot of struggle within that space. And I think lawyers have a significant role to make sure that they fill the gap, which means that we have to think about institutional renewal. As law society, what are we doing to intentionally recruit new cohort of litigators and profile them? Because it's not enough to recruit people. It's important to profile young litigators who are doing well. What are we doing to be able, how long are we going to be going back to Paul Muite and his peers whenever we have complex matters? So again, a challenge to PIL committee and membership to think about institutional renewal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Makofi. Clearly, bado tuko commercial lawyer mood. Tutasaidiana msijali. Commissioner Ingutia. Habari ya shemeji. Karibu. Asante sana. Diana Gishengo. Ningekuambia utuimbie ile anthem yetu but hawajui kuimba. Your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, my senior Ogada, and lately my lawyer when I am pursued by Subarus and many other things. Good afternoon, fellow learned colleagues, but most importantly, good afternoon, taxpayers. Good afternoon, taxpayers. Good afternoon. As you have this conversation of public interest litigation, rule of law, remember you are taxpayer. I want to first thank the Law Society of Kenya and colleagues who are here from different fraternities, civil society, for the solidarity that you showed to all of us at TISA, especially the last 1 month when we were targeted, harassed, and threatened by the state. We believe for our work around the rule of law and public accountability, especially on public finance matters. We really appreciate that solidarity, and we hope that the society will keep at it because it will be very, very much needed. Today, there's a launch that is happening in Nairobi of Vision, that one. Vision 20, beyond Vision 20, let's use beyond Vision 2030. Sometimes it's called the road to Singapore. Our vision may be called Vision to Singapore. A country calling it Vision, the road to another country. We don't even love freedom, but it's interesting. And maybe that will be a good analogy of we are creating a vision for the country at a time where, when we analyze the vision, that Vision 2030, that was written at a moment of vulnerability for this country, and we willed that moving forward, as we discuss development, the rule of law, justice will be at the center of it. And if you do an audit or a scorecard of Vision 2030, you will realize part of the reason why we have not made the milestones we ought to have made is because we treated development as separate from constitutional democracy. Yet the two are very, very much linked. Why I use that beyond Vision 2030 is because when I look at the room, I know there are people who are just marking what ought to have been a constitutional engagement on the Vision beyond 2030. And I don't know why governments have not respected the view of active citizens to engage us meaningfully in that particular process. We work on social accountability. If you find me a bit humble on this panel, I am seated with my seniors in every respect. Wanjiro founded TISA. I took over from her. Jedida sent me to church every Sunday to offer her legal aid. Waikwa sent me to do so much research around public interest. So if I get humble, please understand. Now, we are headed into an election. We will do our elections, and I don't know whether we are proud as Kenyans of how we do our elections and as taxpayers. Most importantly, as taxpayers. The last election was 2022. The next one is 2027. Does that feel too far? Is it too far apart? The impact of what we decided in 2022. 2027 is close enough to correct, is it? I don't think so. So social accountability, public participation is what we do in between the electoral periods. Luckily, this constitution laid that particular framework for us. Article 1 is like a power of attorney. That the people who are in power, we have given them a power of attorney, but a power of attorney can be revoked at any time. So social accountability is what we do every other time that we feel the people who we have elected are not being accountable, they are not delivering the outcomes that we want. It becomes the mechanism through which we say, we had wanted this vision. You have given us this, we must correct it. And we engage with it at all fronts. With the executive, some of us permanently give submission to parliament. Why they ignore, I do not know. And then thereafter, if there is no reprieve, we go to court. After we go to court, we win. Because the Constitution wins. The Constitution, the rule of law in the long run will win. But it is never a win. Because judgments do not implement themselves. And jurisprudence is just jurisprudence. Imagine thereafter, we need you. We need you to implement a number of good things that lawyers in public interest litigation have done. I'll use the example currently of the Kenyan debt. The Kenyan debt, does it pain lawyers? You okay with it? We are not okay. We are borrowing 3.5 billion a day and repaying 6.4 billion every day. It's a very good balance sheet. Very good. You borrow how much per day? You repay 6.5, like 3 billion we know we don't know where to get it. What do we do with, where do we borrow from? Kenyan banks, China, and so on. Every time we borrow, that is future tax. That is future tax. So, with people here, we went to court, and the court ruled we need all the debt contracts. How debt was acquired, how it got into the country, how it was utilized, how it will be repaid, okay, and so on. So we asked for all this information. Don't tell us that we have a 13 trillion debt. For meaningful engagement on our debt, we need those contracts. The government of Kenya has been in contempt. This is the second year. Could you join us in getting the debt contracts? Because that is the only way we will be able to do a debt audit that is informed by evidence, that explains why we have Safaricom divestiture, that explains why there will be very many public-private partnership, why Zimbabwe would have better investment capacity than Kenyans who are here. This is very close and personal. The economy must be democratized. We must democratize our economy, but everybody must come on board. Ogada, you've said most of the people here are corporate and commercial lawyers. Maybe this becomes the invitation. The leases, the mergers you're doing for us, please remember they may be linked to the debt, which is future tax. And I have already told you, based on how much we borrow and how much we repay, already tuko kwa Shylock. Tulishatoka kwa Sacco, tukaenda bank, sahi tuko kwa Shylock. Ukiwa kwa Shylock, now we need to get very woke and address our debt crisis and economic crisis. As we do that particular process, remember we have already defaulted on pending bills. We cannot pay you the money you used and supplied government services because we must first repay debt. Is that very constitutional? It is another area we are inviting you, because Article 203 says that the first thing we should think about at any given point is national interest. If we are in this debt crunch and we are thinking about the national interest, we are defaulting on pending bills, but we are also defaulting on essential services like education and health, because capitation money is not being released. What actions must we take? For those who can draft the petition to go to court, you can help us track contracts as they come in and pack them so that we get the people to come on board and engage. That way, public interest litigation does not remain at jurisprudence. It becomes power and participation in action for a very long period. Then ultimately, if we go that route, we will reset the social contract and the people of Kenya will be ultimately in power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The economy must be democratized. I've never thought of that. Aileen Imbosa, IJM, over to you.
Thank you, Evans. Good afternoon, all. So my name is Aileen Imbosa, and I'm here on behalf of IJM, International Justice Mission, and in my capacity as well as an advocate. So I'll keep weaving in and out of our institutional capacity as International Justice Mission and as an advocate based on my own individual observations of the system. So we are here today, I think, because the center is not holding. Because what we have been seeing in terms of the rule of law is that it has been experienced, or the lack thereof has been experienced at the margins of society. The people we normally look at, the disenfranchised. But over time, we are realizing that the center is not holding, because as we continue having these infractions happening to poor people, people without means or resources, eventually this spreads and becomes a systemic problem. And that is why we are here today to just talk about when the rule of law is, when institutions are not working, we all become vulnerable. And that is the theory that I want to advance today. Thank you. So that when we talk about the effects of the lack of respect for the rule of law, and we talk about the institutions that are failing, we are here because now this has become a systemic problem. I wanted to talk to us through the lens of an advocate who conducts cases and advocates for victims of police abuse of power and victims of sexual and gender-based violence. Because for the longest time, civil society organizations have been standing in the gap of advocating for victims. And like I'm saying, and I'm insisting, we've been doing it from the margins of society. The people with means, the people with resources, such as advocates yourselves, this has not been a priority for you. But when in Nairobi, the Nairobi Friday floods started happening, and we saw that picture of a Range Rover floating on water. Did you guys see it? Initially, as advocates, I imagine when it was flooding under the bridge, you'll just simply say, I'll use the expressway. But now it's no longer working even for us who are able to use the expressway. So that if the expressway is not working for you and you're supposed to go on the underpass, your Range Rover is being washed away by water. It forces us to come back to the table to reconcile on the problems that you're having. One of the things that I keep noticing is the intersectionality of issues. We lost an advocate who works in the forestry industry. And I remember the Law Society of Kenya called for protests. And as advocates, we attended on the streets. Did you people notice what was unique about it? Is that there was no tear gas, right? There was nobody who was beaten on the street. There was no chaos, right? On that day, we had the right to enjoy the right to protest. But what happens when our communities, the people who live on the fringes of society, are going on the streets? They are beaten up, they are killed, they are abducted from their homes because they're simply exercising their rights. So I put it to you that when institutions fail, we all become vulnerable, and we need to expand how we interpret vulnerability from the traditional way in which we look at it to how systemic problems affect all of us. And I wanted to just talk briefly about how IJM is looking at this, so that my question, or the question I've been asked, is to talk about how this affects civic spaces. And this has already been touched on by the speakers who've gone before me. There are simple problems, 3 problems. I'm not going to say the killing of protesters, the abductions, because that's not the real problem. The real problem is the impunity of institutions. The real problem is the lack of the politicization of public institutions and appointments. And the third problem is the lack of public trust. Naturally, it comes at the third end, it's the tail end of all this. So that when you're talking about institutional impunity is why a police officer can beat up a woman, a child, in front of their mother's house, beat to death 2 boys, and leave them to death. And they just die like that, and life continues. Institutional impunity is why we are having a young boy who's protesting on the streets being shot in the scrotum, and he just dies. Nobody's talking about it. Sure, we'll do one post or another, but we have to just reconcile that we have enabled this problem. And so the first thing that I'd like to challenge public interest litigators, and it's something that even as IJM we are doing, is to go back to our communities. And going back to our communities does not mean physically being in your community every day. It's to also understand what language communities are inferring as lack of justice. So that when we talk about justice for communities, how are communities phrasing what justice looks like for them? Currently, as IJM, because we really have this theory of change, and this theory of change really feeds into the topic of conversation today, the idea of strengthening institutions. Because as Diana is saying, we cannot sit back and wait for this to self-correct. As IJM, we work with the ODPP, we work with the National Police Service, we work with the Law Society of Kenya, we work with the judiciary at different capacities, with the understanding that the law and the public interest litigation is just one tool that we need to use to advocate for change. So we've hidden in the courts for far too long, and now the results are coming back to haunt us. When we talk to our communities, we are able to solve the rule of law problems, and I think that's one of the problems that we are having right now as a country. We have become experts as advocates in prosecuting contempt of court proceedings. How many of you have done a hearing for contempt proceedings or have just followed them up on the screens? I'm sure you look at it and you tell yourself, a few of us, right? And you tell yourselves, these people are being finicky and they are in our face every day. In fact, I've had advocates even tell me to my face, why are you people always finding problems? As public interest litigators, it's a comment we have to contend with every day because people do not see the value of how this affects us all eventually. So my call today, and before I leave it to Evans, before he gets me to questions, it's a call for solidarity, for advocates to get out of their legal languages and to come back and talk to communities so that we are able to speak in tandem with our communities and get out of the courtrooms so that tangible change is when we are speaking the language of communities, speaking around the priorities and helping them solve their problems by themselves, basically building the agency of communities. The president of the Law Society of Kenya has very briefly alluded to something that I find very problematic. He said that LSK kept going to court and it was found to be reactive. And even as civil society organizations, how many cases or how many courtrooms can we be in? We do not have enough capacity. Even if all the advocates of the Law Society of Kenya, the ones who are practicing, the 20,000 or so, if we all took up one public interest litigation suit, we'll still not be able to match the change that we want to advance. So we have to go and build the capacity of our communities. It's work that as IJM we are doing. We are doing it through something called survivor leadership, so that we are building the capacity of communities to do this work sustainably, so that we do not have gaps and we do not rely on the system too much. Thank you.
Munafaa kupiga makofi vizuri zaidi ya hapo. Dada yangu ameingia hapa. Makarios, ulisema ni factorials. Come and show them how factorials are done. Nimeona watu wamekula lunch hapa. Tatu. Fuata yeye. Do as she does. Haya. Nogino. Repeat. Twende. Ngoja jetera hanini. Ngoja. Anza alafu wafuate. Haya, sasa ni kwenyu. Asante sana. Rie mno. Mr. Titus Gitonga. Oh. Comrades power. Comrades power. Comrades ria. Kwako. Miss Wanjiro Gikonyo, my good friend, my elder sister, apologies. Kwako.
You're forgiven always for the great work you do, relentlessly and tirelessly, case after case. And we are relentless, we are not bowed, and we'll continue the struggle. We were discussing over lunch with Waikwa. We started this journey together. As I was setting up TISA, we were instituting the CDF case. And Waikwa was our advocate. It was wonderful to hear him again, going back to the basics and bringing out that philosophy. And he did the same then. So when we sat at lunch and we started a discussion about 2027 elections, he was like, oh no, not again. Because we've been in this space. But we agreed it's important to hold the space. And as Waikwa said, I think Diana said it as well, civil society has held the space. We sometimes feel we haven't progressed enough because the force against constitutionalism is very strong, but that is why we are here, to take stock of what assets and resources you have that you can add on to this struggle, because I believe LSK has also really held the space. And it's an honor to be here, and it's always an honor to share space with the society. So what is the moment we are in? I would like to take more of a political slant. What is our moment? And what is it we are called to do? Because we have the independence generation that fought the liberation struggle. We then have the second liberation that brought us multi-party democracy. And also the Constitution. So what is the moment we are in? Because Kenya, as you've been told, is a country built by the struggle of its citizens. And it is a country still on the struggle for accountable governance and for egalitarian social constitutionalism, I think is what Waikwa said. We want a society that is inclusive. Kenya is one of the most unequal countries in the world. It is also a country with really high youth unemployment, which is why our politicians find it easy to manipulate our young people, enlist them as political goons, and terrorize citizens to gain legitimacy. And apart from the immediate effects of insecurity, think what that does to those young people who are being militarized, who are being taught to use violence, who are really, whose lives and futures are being conditioned into a path that is, very scary and very disturbing. So the long-term impacts of the present political mobilization is scary to think about. So what moment are we in? I'd want to say, echoing and building on what has been said here, we have a constitution. Yes, it's a people's constitution, but if you've read Willy Mtunga on this, talking about the 4 C's, talking about our constitution process, we have a constitution from the middle. It's a constitution fought for by professionals, by civil society, by academics, intellectuals, who then made it a citizen-led process. But properly speaking, it's a constitution from the middle. It's a constitution that was then imposed on our political leaders, and they tried to dilute it as much as they could. But still, we have one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. But then we don't have the culture of constitutionalism. So I want to say that the moment we are in is that struggle for constitutionalism. And I think the BBI, much as it was flawed in many ways, made the same argument. And I think this is the discussion that we have. How do we become, law-abiding citizens? How do we deal with, vote buying? How do we encourage our citizens to stand strong and, not elect thieves? I mean, not our citizens, ourselves, our thieves, our rapists, our murderers in cases. Yes, we know all these facts, and what they say that Kenyans lose their mind around elections. The behavior of Kenyans is, hard to understand around elections. Of course, there are incentive structures around this. So, and I think the NCCK have done some work, TISA has done some work, trying to look at what is this culture that we are trying to build. And this is the struggle we are on. And if we look at the previous struggle, it's not won in a day. So let us encourage ourselves and remind ourselves that those who came before us struggled for a while. Lives were lost as they are being now. I think the big difference now is that the lives we are losing are our young people. Our young people are the ones who have really been seized with this struggle. And I think that's a generational thing. I think a lot of the people in this room would be in the millennial group. Millennials had better opportunities. Maybe millennial, I'm a Gen X, so I think, yeah, this is millennials. I might be the oldest in this room, but that's not a problem. But the point is, when the Gen Zs then confront a society that has no space for them, political spaces are, you need patronage. Economic spaces really don't work. You get a degree and you've had this story, then you're driving a taxi, if you're lucky. You'll be driving even, you'll be doing, working for 100 shillings a day, having, gone through your university education. So there is no space. And this is why our youth are out protesting. So what is this moment and what does it require of us? And I just want to reinforce what has been said before, that well done on being in this room. Well done that I saw other people coming in, standing back there to be in this room. Well done to the LSK for having a panel on PIL and for the important work you have done holding this space. But more is being asked. Because remember, we have a constitution from the middle. We now need to start asking, how do we then bring in this constitutionalism? I have a few suggestions, because part of the struggle is thinking, and as Waikwa said, deliberating, documenting, deeper reflection. So all I have is a few suggestions. Recognizing that we are dealing with a lot of complexity, especially the commercial complexity. As Diana said, many of you work in the commercial sector. A lot of the interface between public sector and commercial sector has become a very complex area, because the rules that apply to government don't apply to private sector. And so you have policy actually being influenced by private investors, by private sector, who are not as accountable or do not have the same checks as the public sector has, ironically. And so there's a lot of complexity there, but it's good that you're in the room because you understand this complexity. You possibly now need to link the corporate knowledge into the public and identify these gaps and think, how do we solve these? So how do we build this culture, constitutional culture? Especially, and maybe just before I go into my suggestions, is recognizing that we have a system designed to fail in terms of our security. The police reforms did not work. They were not concluded, and Waikwa spoke to that. So we don't have institutions that serve, protect, and uphold human rights. We have institutions that are being weaponized and subverted and undermined to terrorize and to hold on to power. And all across our regimes, the police and security services have been used to hold on to power. There's the saying that goes, it's about the money, stupid. It's about power, and then it's about money. So as we sit in this room and we look at this complicated context, we will think about what to do. And I have, like I said, a few suggestions. One, I think we are trying, because we're in a Gen Z moment, the moment of liberation or of revolt is the Gen Z moment, without a doubt. Our young people came out, and there are people who will say, oh, they were facilitated, our people came out. And I think anybody here who knows young Gen Zs who are on the street know they came out until they were, killed, abducted, surveilled, shot. some of the tear gas used was so toxic that some people actually got sick, especially after the parliament incursion, when the government realized that these young people were fearless because they were tossing back the tear gas canisters. And actually they would say, don't touch that one is a bad one, let it go, but this one, toss it back. So they use toxic gas. How does a government use toxic gas on its youth? But the point is, how do we tap that protest energy for transformation? So what I would urge is that as you work on your PIL, I really liked what the president said. He was talking about a lot of structural work. He was talking about working with parliament and all of that. But you also have to recognize that you need to do political work. You need to do political work with regard to the forthcoming election, but you also need to deal with what my colleague here was saying, the underlying factors. So you need to work at all these levels. So one of the things is internal. In building a culture of constitutionalism, and Waikwa said this, culture is lived. Culture is learned through practice. Culture is built by our local interaction and experience with the practice. It's not theoretical. So how you work, how you represent in boards, how you represent as advisors in corporate and trade agreements, how you work as council, state council, that is the culture. So constitutionalism is not built by our politicians, it's also built by us. And I think this moment calls for a reflection. I believe the religious are also trying to have the same reflection, where they say, what have we done? Not all of them, some parts of them. What is it that we are doing that is actually undermining the Constitution? So I would say, what are the regulations to ensure? I know I sit on at least one board, and I've sat on others and engaged with representatives of LSK, and I'm like, really? Because they don't show up. Or they show up and they say things that are counter what, the spirit of the, how boards operate and the collusion that happens there and the self-censorship of professionals when they sit on boards where interests where interests are on the table. So I would urge that this process could address that internal reflection. The second, agreeing fully, and maybe I won't even try to elaborate what Waikwa was saying about being strategic. The state has recognized, keep them busy, let them run after every violation, legal violation. Not every case is important, so maybe do the audit and agree how to do this strategically. And then what are the lessons, as Waikwa was saying, around these strategic cases? What are the options? Collaborate with learning institutions that have a lot of expertise in some of these areas that are researching them. Collaborate with civil society organizations to collect data and to bring citizens on board. As we did the CDF case, the one thing I always felt, and we've discussed this with Diana and even with other colleagues, is we fought a case for almost, I think now it's 8 years, without the citizens, without these weighty issues having the citizens on board. We haven't used court users, we haven't used the other mechanisms. So let's think about how to link these important strategic litigation with citizens. And I would ask, how would, with regard to the citizens, the structured mechanisms are court user committees. How vibrant are those? Are those avenues that can be activated? What about community-based legal resource centers? They are very different organizations have local resource centers. Most of them are underfunded. So maybe it's time to do an audit and see how do legal resource centers, I know TISA has, I know has, and I was speaking to Kamau of the Defenders Coalition, they have. So maybe it's time to synergize because resources are very, very scarce. I know TI has, and TI has digital capacity. Maybe it's time to say, what are the capacities that we have and how do we collaborate? Because we are at war. We are at war for our constitutional culture. We are at war for the lives of our young people. We are at war for our civic freedoms. We are at war for our economic governance. We are at war. It's a war of ideology. It's a war of belief, but it is a war. The only difference is we are not fighting it with guns. So we need to come together and be very strategic and very, very focused about it. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Wewe, tulisikizana makofi ni factorials. Mnaniangushaga uka hapa. Haya, mnafuata makofi factorials, ndio? The Vice President of the Law Society of Kenya. Good to see you, madam. Moja. Asante sana. Sasa mkisikia hiyo language, that is why some of you mkinionaga kwa koti nakaa ni kama loose wire, inakaa mahali. This is where I get the knowledge. Naendaga naongea nao angwana, unapewa energy charger, tukikuja pale you are. So unasikia namna hiyo? So hapa ndio tunatoaga. Mimi na ndugu yangu mkubwa anaitwa Suyanka Lempa. We say it like it is. Ama namna gani? Titus Gitonga. Transparency International. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ogada, and thank you to the Law Society for really bringing this discussion to fruit. I think for all of us, it is a duty that we gave ourselves under the Constitution to be the protectors and the custodians of what we have given under the social contract. So at Transparency International Kenya, we address the rule of law through an anti-corruption lens. And an anti-corruption lens is how we define corruption. So we define corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. And that makes you wonder, so where do we find the entrusted power? And the entrusted power is infused across the entirety of our constitution, but more importantly, within chapter 6 of the constitution. Why I say chapter 6 is because entrusted power is everybody, nasikia kila mtu anasemanga tunataka power. Yeah, so power, and that it is not in jest. I think as citizens, through our social contract, we've given a lot of power to the institutions that we have established under the Constitution. So exercising that power really becomes something that is very lucrative, but it has to be lucrative for the right reasons and for the public interest. And now comes in why that public interest is really important. But before I go there, is just to say that some of us who are not very litigious practice in the court of public opinion. The court of public opinion is what I think my colleagues have been inviting you to, that you do not have to craft a lengthy litigation to go to court. But within the spaces that you're in, are you providing the information and the knowledge that is necessary for the society to understand what the social contract beholds or what it has and how they can exercise that sovereignty? The way we structured our constitution, I think it's very interesting to some people who look at our constitution. When you say that sovereignty can be exercised directly or indirectly, there are pundits who say that a lot of these power that we've given even to the judiciary, there is an extent to which the citizens are able to take it back and exercise that through the courts of public opinion. And those courts of public opinion is what we saw during the Gen Z action. Yeah? So if we as the citizens are able to be knowledgeable enough and able to hold those that we have put in places of power accountable, then we we are actually still within the confines of the rule of law, because we say that we shall, as a people, exercise our sovereignty directly or indirectly. And just to get into a bit of the area that I wanted to have discussions around, on public interest litigation, it is not enough that we have judicial authority. Judicial authority has to also coincide with executive compliance, because a lot of the public interest litigation that we have majorly is targeted at those who are exercising delegated power through our constitution. So, and I think as we craft public interest litigation, sometimes we've even tried to categorize. So we have strategic litigation and we have public interest litigation. There is what sometimes, when you're doing public interest litigation, you really have to carry the masses. And that is something that we have not managed. And I think, as an example has been given, how do you carry the public with you when you're doing litigation? And it is touching on the issues that really concern them. Yeah? So how do we do that? But also going by the space that we are working in, there is some level of strategic litigation that is needed, where even some of these reactionary or planned litigation is based on making things to be on record. You can go to court not yet having entirely disseminated or deciphered what you want to go to court. And you've seen even citizens try this in court. Just to have some of the issues that we are grappling with. We are right now in court on odious debt. It's a subject that a lot of research, once you do it, it has not been litigated. But we are setting the space in the region and globally on some of these issues, because our constitutional framework allows us to interrogate some of these issues. And why I really come to the centrality of Chapter 6 of the Constitution is because, again, going to that central word of power. When we talk about power, the Chapter 6 specifically even targets state officers. And state officers, all state officers are public officers, but not all public officers are state officers. Why they target state officers is because a lot of what we envisage in terms of how we have delegated power is mostly with the state officers. And the state officers in this case, of course, those that hold the executive office, we have also the judiciary. So the judiciary is among those institutions that really, other than adjudicating on public interest litigation, they have to also uphold institutional accountability. I think as the Law Society, we have been at the forefront, and you have been at the forefront of now bringing to fore that we have a problem with the way the judiciary has been exercising their authority. And that institutional accountability is really very important for them to have legitimacy, to the point that once judicial authority is exercised, the executive cannot but comply. Yeah? So that sort of balance has to be there. And of course, for us is to think about how are we addressing the institutional accountability issues with the judiciary, looking at the jurisprudence and all that. But when we come to parliament that are supposed to oversight, again, is another conundrum. We have Sokohuru. It is not us even who came with this. They blatantly say it out on how they are getting incentives either to play the oversight role or legislative role. So for Parliament, of course, we have that power as we head to the elections, but Parliament becomes a very central role in terms of how the entirety of the rule of law is supposed to operate. Because when there is impunity from those who are making the laws and those who are visibly interacting with the public as the custodians of representation to oversight both the executive and to some extent even the judiciary, then we really have a problem. So how we deal with parliamentary impunity becomes really important as we get into this discussion. And of course, finally, the executive, I will not say more about what has been said. The only other thing I would want to share is the typologies that we have observed as Transparency International. We currently have like over a dozen cases, public interest litigation cases in court, but there are some issues that need our reflection in this forum. One is the types of how the lack of rule of law operates. One is direct defiance. So this is where there is open and deliberate refusal by those who are the ones who are being targeted by judicial pronouncements to abide by that. And we have seen that in several instances. We have delayed compliance. I think we have all seen some instances where the executive will deliberately, especially when you come to the cases on enforced disappearance and the cases around. So there will be some deliberate delay until somebody is released and the IG is very happy to appear in court and say, but the person is out in the public. But for sure, you see there is already something that went on. There is the continuing conduct. Ebola case is one of those where the court makes a decision, the government reacts, but you still hear that things are happening. Yeah. So again, how do we address that? Institutional non-compliance, that again is quite straightforward. Failure to operationalize court. So because the reflection that I'm trying to get us to, it is not enough that we go to court and get favorable outcomes. It is important that those outcomes inform executive behavior and that they are complied with. So how do we nudge? And one of the solutions that has come here is that citizen agency around these issues. So I'll not go into the others. Maybe just to end is to maybe urge us to have the two areas of focus that would include constitutional implementation gaps. More specifically, when you're looking at public interest litigation, on how do we address Chapter 6. It's an entire chapter in our constitution that for sure we either need to see how it is being operationalized or as a country, how do we move forward? Chapter 12, I think my colleagues have talked about that on public finance, which is again another area. The second area is on restoring institutional accountability. For all the three arms of government, I think that has been highlighted: judicial accountability, parliamentary oversight, and executive compliance being among the very top of how we are able to try and prioritize our work on public interest litigation. Thank you.
I'm not going to belabor the point. Utarudi baadaye. We are about to hear a senior counsel. Sema, we are about to hear a senior counsel. Repeat after me. Yes. A senior counsel. Sindio? So if you are born na ujaiona vile senior counsel anakaa, hivyo ndiye anakaa. Before we hear the senior counsel, dakika moja. Simame kidogo. Another senior counsel ameingia. Wilfred Nderito, a good friend of ours. Hello sir. Haya. Wangapi walienda nursery school? Very lapa alienda group of schools. Haya, head, shoulders, knees and toes. Mnakumbuka hiyo? Beryl, ulienda hiyo, wewe ulifundishwa. Twende.
Head, toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulder, knees and toes, ears, eyes, nose and mouth.
Remix.
There's a classmate of mine here who was not following orders, but I'll deal with him later. Thank you very much. Situjibigie makofi.
Yeah.
Makofi ni namna hii. Let's follow her.
3 factorials.
Rudia. Senior Counsel Jedaida Warohio. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I've listened very quietly to everyone. May I recognize all the senior counsels here? Sio watarajiwa. Yeah. I'm happy to be here because I used to be a member of the PIL committee during my younger days, so you can see where to start to be a senior counsel. Then the PIL looked like a panther or a tiger, and I'm happy today to be able to speak to the issue of PIL. It now looks like a lion. At least we know it, familiar, and quite a bold strategy. A lot has been spoken. I'm not going to repeat what has been said. I'm just going to say it in a different way. I liked how Catherine started us with the issue of inform, protect, reform, and disrupt. And for me, it's to disrupt the culture of impunity. Waikwa mentioned about exploiting the power of the law. And that is where I sit today. How do we exploit the power of witness protection? Because it's a legal phenomena that we have, so that we're able to understand it, appreciate it, and safeguard it. I know when we think about witness protection, we think about it only from a criminal perspective. Mainly that is the focus, but also it has come to bear fruit on other matters that are not only public interest in criminal law, but also in constitution and civil matters. For example, there is the Uhuru Owino case, where the community had an issue because of environmental concerns, and we were fortunate to work with that community to be able to provide special protection to some of the witnesses who needed to speak to the court. The other thing I want to lean on is what moment are we in now? And that has elaborately been spoken to. And I think we're in a moment where we also need to link PIL, and TI has begun speaking to that, PIL and post-judgment implementation strategy. So every time we file or we think through a public interest litigation, in the same breath, we must ask ourselves, what is the post-judgment implementation strategy? One case that has puzzled me for many years is the 160 girls. At least now I can see there's a deliberate movement in terms of breaking down that law to ensure that there's constitutional compliance. Then trusted power that TI speaks about. We are entrusted with a certain power as part of the public service to provide a very specialized facility where we provide special protection to witnesses who are at risk or who are intimidated. And one of the criteria that is in the Witness Protection Act, which I believe some of us may not have read, is the public interest to prosecute. So we could be having a public interest on a certain case or certain issues, but is there a public interest to prosecute? That is very, very important, because at times some things fall because there is no movement towards certain aspects, either to litigate it or to prosecute it. The Constitution of Kenya is very important. We need to ask ourselves the language that we are using. I still hear the new Constitution. 16 years, this is a teenager looking for identity, and that is the moment we are in. The Constitution 2010, why? Why didn't we talk about Constitution 19? Is it 69? We should be saying the Constitution. I don't know whether there's another one, I only know one, the Constitution of Kenya. So that language needs to help us to be able to move forward, because the Constitution, the constitutional framework provides a very, very good basis for us to work. The Witness Protection Agency is a public institution. It's an institution that was conceived to help us deal with matters justice, deal with matters national security, in terms of helping us during the time of we had the spate of terror. And the act was the National Assembly, the act was enacted in 2006, but was not operationalized until 2008, when the ministers had that say in terms of when the act becomes operational. So what does that tell us? It means that we have legislation in our constitution, in our country. Some of it we have not used it, so we need to activate that power. For example, there was a comments Wanjiro kept saying the commercial. Under the CMA regulations, there is protection for witnesses or whistleblowers. So how many of us know those regulations? How many of us in the commercial sector are using those regulations and activating them to use that facility? Witness protection is really there just to safeguard life and livelihoods, to promote accountability and guard the truth. Because witnesses who have the truth will only speak when they feel and they know they are safe and are able to be assured of that safety, even after they speak, even after they sign that affidavit. Do you know, for every 19,230 citizens, one is making an application for special protection. That tells you that there is a great need. However, there is need for us to ensure, as has been said, that there is institutional independence, which is very critical, that also those institutions are properly facilitated in terms of funding, and in cases of special protection, some funding has to be ring-fenced, because you cannot limit that financial resource. When it comes to witnesses, the issue of anonymity is very important. The issue of protecting them. The issue of protecting them. The issue, I think it's all turning red. The issue of ensuring that they are not, the identity or any identifying information is not revealed is very important. In the witness protection law, there is an offense of interfering with witnesses. But is it strong enough? I think when you look at countries like Colombia, I need protection. I need protection. Yes, yes. It is an aggravated crime. It's a very serious crime that even attracts asset seizing. So we need to ensure that some of those offenses are very importantly situated in our laws, so that when we are moving for accountability, especially on high-profile individuals, we have to have a strong mechanism. And we do as a country. So all is not lost even as we speak here. Because when you look at the work of the agency in the country, it has been able to assist the country in terms of ensuring that institutions like the Director of Public Prosecution is able to prosecute and is able to provide the necessary protections through the witness protection. When you look at the National Police Service, when they are investigating cases, they also reach out to the agency. Witness protection cannot be underestimated. If you recall in the US, the Watergate investigations, there was a protected person who was known as Deep Throat. That is in the 1970s. That case, that investigation would not have been successful without that. And we have that opportunity to utilize the facility here. Unfortunately, in the post-election violence, we were not able to do that because we had not activated our local mechanism. But on cases of terror, we have been able to provide the necessary mechanism. Is witness protection a constitutional guarantee? It is. And that's why Article 50 is very important. For us, practically what that means, that the facility is supposed to ensure that we're able to conduct investigations and prosecutions in a way that protects those who hold the truth and those who have the evidence to assist in court. When you think about the institutions that we have, most of the constitutional commissions and the independent offices have security of tenure. So theoretically, we do not have a challenge. I think what we need to ask ourselves, what do we need to do practically, which has been spoken to. I want to focus on the Bar Association. The Bar Association has been very critical in terms of providing leadership in public interest litigation. We need to take that further when it comes to post-judgment implementation and how the bar works with various non-state institutions in this aspect. And how does the bar then link with an institution like the Witness Protection Agency for advice in terms of witness protection and actual protection of witnesses who are vulnerable, and also being provided with technical support in the courts. There are three recommendations I would make in terms of moving forward with as the bar associations. One, the LSK sits in various statutory and constitutional boards. What is their strategy in those boards? Because that is the preventive approach before then we go to public interest litigation. We must use those forums, those spaces in a very strategic manner to preempt some of the issues from coming up. Two, we usually have the CPDs. I think we must start dedicating at least 2 of those CPDs to be compulsory on issues around the Constitution, on issues around the Bill of Rights, on issues around promoting and protecting institutions. And this should not be paid CPDs. These should be compulsory CPDs that are not costed for us, so that we can also add into the numbers in terms of PIL litigants, so that it is not only a few, but a number of us who are litigating. 3, if you look at our academic curriculum and training, I'm not sure whether anyone seated in this room ever went through a witness protection class, even theoretically. I doubt. So then when you're going to litigate and you have a protected witness, how do you litigate in that space? So I think we need to think about our curriculum review to ensure that happens. The last 2 issues I want to say is, and TI spoke about this, the issue of corruption. There are now 3 bills that I think are significant even before we go to the elections. One is the Anti-Corruption Amendment Bill 2025, the Whistleblower Bill 2025, that are under the leadership of the Honorable Attorney General. These 2 bills are very instrumental in terms of assisting us strengthen the EACC, strengthen the Evidence Act, strengthen the Witness Protection Act, and strengthen the Commission and the Administration of Justice to take up the whistleblower mechanism. A lot of the issues we are challenged with have a lot to do with the lack of an infrastructure on whistleblower protection. And we've lost a number of people on that. Then the 3rd bill is what the PS Justice is pushing, the National Victim Protection Service Bill. After every PIL, there are victims, there are people who need to be rehabilitated, to be compensated, to be managed, so that we also stop the continuous trauma and re-traumatizing those who are already traumatized. So those are 3 bills that need to be considered, and I think the LSK can lobby for the same. Politically, we have the Political Parties Disputes Tribunal. It gives us opportunity as lawyers to be the chairperson and to be part of the 3 members on a part-time basis for 6 years. Have you ever thought about occupying that space? 2, in the same Political Disputes Tribunal, within 6 months to the election, we have another 9 ad hoc opportunities for lawyers to sit. How are we investing as a bar to train those legal members there and the other ad hoc members who will come? I think we also need to be strategic enough to train before, so that then the 9 members can submit themselves to that framework. I know I had said lastly, but I think the last of the last is public officers also need witness protection. Private citizens also need witness protection. How is this carved in our human resource policies? Is it there? We need to think about that so that it becomes easier for the agency to support witnesses in the public and private sector so that the mechanism is smooth. And lastly, and for sure this is my last one, every August we have this migration. Yesterday, or is it today? Yesterday, FIDA finished their migration, the women lawyers. This the LSK ends then soon. And I'm happy my chairperson is here for ICJ. ICJ will finish. I think next year is a strategic opportunity for the 3 institutions as bar associations to come together and strategically have one conference that really speaks to us going through the process of the election and post-election. Because we think about the election, but what about the post-election? Irrespective of the winner, we need to have a tripartite way of dealing with it next year. And early, because August is the election month, it has to be early. So we need to think about how do we move our migration earlier, but how do those 3 very critical institutions made up of lawyers come together to address the issues. I think May will be a late time, but that is the latest you can have. Lastly, I just want to say, when justice is strengthened, when every witness can speak freely and every citizen can access the protection of the law. That is the only way we'll be able to even have meaningful public interest litigation where citizens are fully engaged in that process.